moving on here. The ouster of Sam Altman as CEO at OpenAI, sending shockwaves through the tech world, surprising Wall Street and Silicon Valley. OpenAI has been at the center of the artificial intelligence hype, receiving billions in funding, including a multi-billion-dollar investment from Microsoft. As aftershocks of the C-suite shakeup wreaks havoc on OpenAI, we're taking a look at what this all means for Silicon Valley and future startups. Here to discuss, we have Kamran Ansari, Headline Venture Partners. So Kamran, let's just start with the general news here. And listen, the headlines keep shifting here. Kamran, we're not sure exactly how we're going to end up the day, but I want to get your just take here. What did you make of the news so far? What was your take?
It's been astonishing. It's been like watching, telenovela or soap opera these last few days. This is a company that is probably one of the most influential, important companies that's emerged in the last decade or longer. And you've had 3 CEOs in the past 72 hours. So it's still unclear exactly what's happening. And it's obviously the talk of not just the tech and the venture business, but now, more broadly, all over the general news, and the general public is also interested in what's happening here. So it's been kind of a very unusual set of circumstances that's come together to have this happen. And I think a lot of it that I'm hearing, at least in the tech and venture space, is around what this says for just governance and corporate governance, and really having folks think about, hey, how are boards comprised? Who are these board members exactly? Because a lot of times that ends up being sort of an afterthought as you're putting together financing round for early stage company, and say, oh yeah, we'll put these guys on the board. That's just how it's going to work. And then you realize that, no, these things actually do matter quite a bit.
Well, what's so interesting to me, Kamran, is that discussion has been around for a while, and we get these periodic reminders. This is a very dramatic one, to be sure, but why hasn't Silicon Valley gotten its act? This is not news, right? Why haven't they gotten their act together on some discipline when it comes to these boards?
So you think about it, I really compare this, and what this reminded me of was the situation with Uber when they were replacing Travis Kalanick, and they brought in Dara Khosrowshahi, who's been fantastic, an amazing CEO there. But that process took place over the course of many weeks, and then there was a weekend-long board meeting. They had I think a 10, 12, 15-person board with public company CEOs and professional investors, members of the founding team there. So there were a ton of folks kind of weighing in. It was a very kind of buttoned-up professional process they went through, and they found that the best answer for them was to make a change with the CEO and do that. This was a 4-person board or 5-person board if you include Sam, which is a very unusual dynamic for a business at this scale. Normally you would see something at this scale have 7, 9, 11-person board. And then the makeup of the board itself, I think Vinod Khosla put out a post today. Just because someone has a fancy title like the head of technology, center at Georgetown, whatever, that person may not have sat on a lot of private company or public company boards. And so it's unclear whether, these folks that were kind of making this decision, really had kind of the purview, the perspective, and the experience to be doing so.
And Kamran, I'm interested too, just your take on what founders might take away from this. I mean, granted, Sam Altman is not your typical founder, but are there lessons learned for founders in all this drama?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the biggest lesson learned is, pick your board members carefully, right? Or make sure that the board composition is something that you're comfortable with going forward. And I think that, typically for an early stage company, what you want to have is usually you'll have 1 or 2 of the critical kind of main investors who sit on a number of boards, who've kind of been through this movie before, have seen companies go through ups, downs, exits, fundraising events, all that sort of thing. You may have the 1 or 2 founders on the board. And then typically what you want to see is like an independent or 2, someone from industry, an experienced business veteran in the space that you're in. And that'll kind of round out, a typical board, what that might look like. And so that's sort of best practice. Now, in a lot of cases, if you're starting a company and you're just raised a seed or Series A round, you're not going to go through all that process. You may just have an investor or 2 in the founder, and that's it. But again, as companies mature, and certainly this company, and I say company, I know it's a nonprofit that owns the wholly owned subsidiary, that's the for-profit, but an entity of this scale at this point should have had, I think, a larger, more sophisticated board. I think you're going to see that now. And one of the other bizarre things is that, the largest shareholders, again, I know it's the for-profit side, it's kind of complicated. Microsoft didn't have a seat, right? You would always expect Microsoft, Sequoia, Tiger, these folks that have large stakes in the business to have seats on the board, and they didn't in this case. So then you're going to see a bunch of changes here happening, not just at OpenAI, but I think all the cohort of companies that are similar.
The other thing I'm curious about is there is, I think, a scenario here where everybody loses their money, like where the investment they put in goes to nothing, goes to zero. So what kind of a ripple effect does that have in the industry? And is it a black eye for the firms that invested in OpenAI?
I think certainly the firms that invested in OpenAI, I imagine they probably did push for a board seat, right? But at a certain point when a company or entity is hot, it's singular, it's the best deal of the century, you sort of let that stuff go. You say, oh, fine, okay, we won't take the board seat, it's fine. I think you saw something similar happen with FTX, where I don't believe that a bunch of the investors really had board seats there because a different Sam, that founder was like, look, I don't want you guys on the board, or we only have 3 seats and that's it. And you say, okay, fine, in order to get involved with this rocket ship, I got to go along with this governance structure. But I think you're going to see the investors push back more. I think the other ripple effect it's having for sure is that all the competing companies that for a while have been sort of playing second fiddle to OpenAI, they're seeing an uptick obviously in applications for jobs. People may be leaving OpenAI. Clients that are looking to reach out and diversify away from relying on OpenAI. So Cohere, Google, Anthropic, all these other businesses that have AI capability are now going to be the beneficiary of this potentially. And it's still not, it's a huge mess, because I think today you saw that 500 of the 700 plus employees have sort of signed a petition saying they don't have faith in the board. They're probably looking for jobs elsewhere. I think you saw news that a number of the OpenAI clients have reached out to other competing solutions to use those instead of OpenAI. So it's having a real damaging effect. And I think before the end of the week, you're going to see some probably significant changes happening in OpenAI, because I don't believe that the folks like Microsoft and Sequoia and others that are invested there are going to let this just kind of go away.
Yeah. And Cameron, finally, just quickly here, we were having you on originally to just talk about the bigger environment for VCs, and then this whole thing happened. Just quickly, how do you think 2024 looks at this point? Do valuations improve? Do we start to see more exits, or do things kind of bump along here?
Well, I think you've seen in the last 6 months a real pickup in both deal activity. You saw a number of IPOs come out finally in September, October. You had Klaviyo and Instacart and Arm. It all started with Kava, the Mediterranean food company or a restaurant back in the spring. So there are a number of other folks that I think are in the pipeline that I think will start to come out in the public market. Names that have been circulated for a while, like Stripe and maybe Plaid, a company, Databricks, Intercom potentially. There are a lot of these folks that have been kind of ready or almost ready, but I think now the window may be opening for them as we head into 2024. And then M&A should pick up too. M&A has been very quiet other than private equity firms buying these sort of great SaaS names. But that's all played out too. They've all been taken out. So Coupa and Zoom, Sumo Logic and Avalara, they've all been bought, right? So by and large now, the great SaaS names that were at approachable valuations are gone. So the private equity folks don't have a lot to buy anymore. So I think you're going to have M&A picking up now that we're in kind of hopefully a more stable interest rate environment. There's more predictability, and I think the buyers feel more comfortable kind of jumping in.
All right, Kamran Ansari, thank you so much for joining the show today, Cameron.
All right, thanks so much.